Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
I'm stuck. He's making cut with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It's another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1. Hey, F1 fans, you're back after your second long break of the season. Congrats. The waiting around will hopefully pay off in some sort of fashion with, there's a lot on the line. Dan Jimenez, my co-host of the program as always. Dan, this is as fun of a, I guess, last 8 races of the season we've probably had since that 2021 year when we saw, of course, the fireworks in that final race. I'm looking forward to the rest of these few races. There's a lot on the line here.
Oh, yeah. The drama is building. It's going to be great. I'm loving it. We've got 3. You got the Americas, the Tour of the Americas, then a 2-week break, and then back to Las Vegas, which I guess isn't part of the Tour of the Americas.
No, it's not.
It's a 2-week break, and then 3 in a row again, Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. So 6 races to decide the championship, which I do think is very much still up for grabs.
Well, so is that what the thing is? That's the most exciting for you is McLaren, winning that constructors title, or is there that little part where you go, mathematically, it's not just available that Lando Norris runs down Max Verstappen. It's that it's the, I don't know. Can you stop the bleeding if you're Red Bull in these last few races here? Because if McLaren has the type of pace that they've had over the last few weeks, and then if they're in concert actually working with one another to make sure that Red Bull, it's like Checo takes himself out of the races. Maybe Mexico, he shows up and does a good job. But honestly, I don't know if it's an inevitability of Lando winning. Like there's enough question mark there, and Max is enough of an astute, crazy driver to pull it off. But I don't know. What do you think the chances are that Lando actually does it?
I'm the eternal optimist, man. So I'm always thinking that there's a chance for that underdog to have the storybook ending on the last race. So yeah, every race I'm looking at how close that's going to be towards the end. We've got 6 races left, but 3 of those are sprint races, and there's an additional 8 points up for grab in each of those sprint races. So so long as he's still mathematically possible, I'm gonna. Not that I'm the world's biggest Lando Norris fan, but I just, for the sake of competition, I think that I'd love to see, everyone would love to see a tight finish,
right? And
the sprint races are going to help.
It's like if the Yankees and Dodgers play in the World Series, the Yankees are like the guys that are the bad guys all the time. It feels like, and you're not a Dodgers fan, and they certainly aren't like in the poorhouse. But you're like, of those two evils, I want this to be a 7-game series at least, and I want there to be some good baseball. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. Is I want this thing to be as tight as possible. I want it to be a down to the last race type of situation. If it is, you just know that Red Bull is going to figure out a way for whoops, they went into each other. I don't know how that happened. We're going to look at this. I don't know, racing incident. Oh, the stewards have called them. Aren't you? I'm picturing all those scenarios in my head, like however this is going to play out. But I want it to be toward the end of the season so that it's not wrapped up with 4 races left. I don't, how many times we've watched that race in Interlagos mean nothing, or wherever, like toward the end of the year where you go, this doesn't mean anything. I don't know what we're doing here. At this time last year, Red Bull had won every race except for Singapore, and that was it. Yep. I think, and it was Max. Checo had won a couple at the front end of the season, and I think he won 19 races last year. That is not the way that you want a top end sport to be. You don't want your team going, 73-9 in the NBA, although it's happened before, and then even that team didn't win a championship. So there's some crazy stuff that can still happen. How about the young guys who are going to be entering the sport this weekend? Circuit of the Americas, Liam Lawson getting his not just, hey, I'm here to fill in type of a deal. This is a full, legit shot at a seat, and Helmut Marko will rip it out from under him if he can. But what are the chances that Liam Lawson proves himself to be a worthy, candidate to stay in that seat. Where does Yuki Tsunoda go from this year, and what do the V card seats look like if Liam Lawson doesn't necessarily pull it off like he should?
Yeah, I think the expectations are high based on his performance when he filled in for Danny Rick last year. You know, he was scoring points and running as fast as Yuki. So I think everyone is expecting him to come in and score points because, I mean, we have on the Williams side, Colapinto came in from nowhere. No one had been talking about him, didn't expect anything, and he's scoring points. So, like, it is not out of the realm of possibility for these rookies to come in with not a lot of experience and be able to be competitive. And so Liam has more experience than Colapinto had at this stage. And I think that Red Bull is trying him out for that Sergio Perez seat next to Max in at least 2026, if not sooner. And yeah, Yuki is under the gun more than anybody else because it's either him or Liam for that seat. And I think it's up or out. If they're going to pick one of those two. It's my prediction. They pick one of those two for 2026, and the one who doesn't make it doesn't stick around, and they're looking for another seat somewhere on the grid.
What's interesting is that, and I don't know what the pace of Mercedes is going to look like the last part of this. I don't know if this break a little bit like the summer break? Like, were they allowed to actually, be at work? It's not like the summer break, I guess. This was because I would assume that there are going to be team after team after team with upgrade after upgrade after upgrade. And Mercedes is that team that's been kind of all over the place all year. It's been a very quick McLaren team, a pretty darn quick Red Bull team, although not nearly as successful as we've seen them. Ferrari is like on any given weekend is either the top of the step or they're in seventh place, and Mercedes is kind of a little bit that way too. So with that four horse race, I guess at the top tier of F1. Where is Mercedes right now? Where's Ferrari? Because there's a little bit of me that kind of goes, yeah, they want to do well and you want to move up in that constructors title, but Ferrari, there's a little bit of me that goes, hey, we're waiting for this Lewis Hamilton thing to take off next year. We're ready to move on to that 2025 car, and certainly development of those 2025 cars has certainly been happening over the last few weeks as well.
Yeah, it's hard to put my finger exactly on where Ferrari is. They're only 34 points behind Red Bull in the constructors standings. And there's a chance that they can move up into that second place, which I think for them would be a huge badge of honor to beat Red Bull in the constructors. And Mercedes, they had a strong summer, and now they're kind of hot and cold. But like you said, this break was not like the summer break. They all continued to work and develop. We know from comments that Red Bull has made and Max has made that they're continuing to work on this current year's car. And not they haven't moved on to 2025 development yet. And they've even said that the 2025 car is not going to be all that different than the current one. They've kind of all reached what they think is maybe that performance limit for this package. And so next year's cars, probably for everybody, will be pretty similar to how they are right now. And then the other big change is that Red Bull recently had kind of got called to the penalty box by the FIA over something that the other teams pointed out in the Singapore race, that they're not going to be able to exploit these last 6 races. And if you haven't seen the news, it's that there is a device, is what they're calling it, a device. Yeah, the device. It's something in the front end of the car that is able to adjust the ride height. So it's like they're calling it the bib or the tray, which I guess is the front section of the floor of the car, and that there was some accessibility from the driver's cockpit to be able to adjust the device and change the ride height of that floor. Why that's a big deal is that they were doing it supposedly, reportedly, in between qualifying and the race.
How did these other teams even find out about that? Is my question. Like, I know that they're all looking at each other all the time, trying to figure things out all the time. They've got their photographers out taking pictures all the time of one another's cars. But like, how would you even know about a device? And between those two sessions too. I mean, certainly they weren't. Yeah. Were they actually breaking rules, or was it just one of those things that was in the shadows of the regulations that nobody had exploited?
There are so many of these things that are just kind of like you read between the lines of the rules, and you're like, well, this isn't explicitly, against a rule, so we're going to test it and see how far we can take it. And they said that the device is something that you could not access after the car is assembled, and so yeah, that there had to have access through this cockpit. So if my previous experience in racing in NASCAR is any indication, it's that everybody knows everybody, and at some point someone can't help but boast about something that they're doing on their car to a buddy at the bar on an off weekend, and then the word just carries, and then you're just like, hey, you guys should actually take a look when the nose cone's off or the front wing is off that Red Bull car, and look for XYZ, and then a few teams catch on, and then they go run into the FIA, which sounds like happened in Singapore.
There's been enough guys who have been who have gotten the tongue lashing from Dr. Marco to think, you know what, I'm going to expose these guys, at this point too. I think there was a story this week. I mean, I can't imagine Red Bull is going to be able to recover very quickly from the disaster of this year's, off-track stuff that obviously set in motion Adrian Newey going to another team, and set in motion also, I think, a lot of investors looking at Christian Horner going, I mean, are you the guy anymore, or what's going on here? And Red Bull just feels, I feel like they're set to, especially when these new regulations come out, they're going to be one of these teams that takes a massive step backward. At least that's the feel. It's been a nice run, Red Bull. It might be good. You might have a 4-time world champion and 3 times constructor title over the past few years, but you have the feeling that reign's coming to an end.
It really does feel that way. I mean, the sport seems to go through these 5 to 10 year swings of dominant manufacturers, and Red Bulls started in 2021, and it might be, this era might be coming to an end. There's so much, like you said, off-track distraction. And yeah, I love it. I love it for the sake of competition and the parity and everything. I think it's great for fans. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that when I read all this news about, because it first came out as there's a team supposedly, skirting the Parc Fermé rules, and nobody was surprised when it was oh, well, It was Red Bull.
Right. Okay. So this weekend specifically, Circuit of the Americas, I know they've done a lot of resurfacing on that track. I was listening to a podcast this week where they said, yeah, the land around there, that part of the track in Austin, it just, I mean, it's a pretty undulating, track, and it's up and down. And I guess the land shifts quite a bit. This is a bumpy track typically, and they've had to resurface it, and they're going to have to continue to resurface it every year. What are the who tends to benefit from something like that, or is it just one of these things where it's nope, this is a quick track for McLaren because McLaren's been quick, basically in all the different races this year?
Yeah, I would say it runs a lot like Silverstone in some regards. A lot of the S's, the high-speed S's, are similar to a lot of those corners. And yeah, it's going to be a lot like the tracks where McLaren has had the advantage lately. So I'm looking to McLaren to continue to lead. The resurfacing thing, it's kind of like, the temperature of the water at the Olympics for the swimmers. It affects everybody the same. I don't think that it's, whoever comes most prepared, who's done the simulator work, and, I think will, have the best head start to the weekend. But I don't imagine it having a huge impact on the relative performance between the teams. But I think that this is the perfect track. If McLaren could pick any of the 6 to start at for this last 6 race run, they probably would pick this one because I think it plays to their hand the most.
Dan, the rest of this way here, I was looking at the driver's standings, and I couldn't help but think, okay, because Lando is kind of, I think people initially before that win, right before that Singapore win was really, it didn't feel like a dagger necessarily, but it did feel like, okay, McLaren, this is the guy who's going to win it for him. And Oscar Piastri is a very, very worthy second seat to this guy, but he's also probably a future world champion. I mean, he certainly has the tools to be able to do it. Do you feel like McLaren's turned that corner to be like, all right, it's Lando's year to win this thing. Let's kind of do the thing where we just back him on all of that.
Yeah, Andrea Stella came out sometime in the last couple of weeks. They made an announcement, or it was in an interview. He said that they've committed, that Oscar is committed to supporting Lando in his bid for the championship. Outside of asking Oscar to give up a win, he's going to do whatever the team asks for him. And like, that's the mutual agreement that they've come to. So, looking back at, say, had this been in place at Monza where they where they finished 2-3 Oscar Lando, they probably would have swapped them and, finished Lando in front of Oscar, but it wouldn't have changed the Hungary outcome where, Oscar was on pace or was in the prime position to win that race, and it was his to win. So they've said it. So we'll see how that actually comes to fruition. There was an interview with Max this week where he said he didn't think Oscar should agree to that he is too good of a driver to play second fiddle to Lando, but that could also be Max just trying to stir what up over there too. But he was just kind of like saying, Oscar, you shouldn't have to already fold and be of service to Lando because you're a championship driver yourself.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what is going on at Mercedes. Is George Russell's seat like firmly his seat for a long time, or what are they going to do there at the Silver Arrows? Because Toto Wolff is in a weird spot because they were just so dominant for so long, and now they're kind of that third, fourth place team, which is the way that F1 I think has historically been, where it's just you don't have nearly that type of dominance for such a long time before somebody finally runs you down, which is what's happened with them. But George Russell feels like a little bit like he's a guy that they're looking at and going, hey, you better start performing a little bit better here, even though he is a very talented guy. And Kimi Antonelli they're sort of hanging their hat on him, but he's brand new to the sport.
Yeah, it's Russell's name, is coming up in some interesting conversations lately. They here recently, even Helmut Marko was talking about, addressing rumors of his Russell, a future Red Bull driver. And, he was saying no, but he has seemed like he's been Toto's golden boy. And, Toto has this tendency to get kind of married to a particular driver. Mm-hmm. I think he's done it a bit with Mick Schumacher, although, Mick's not driving, but I could see him riding it out longer with George than maybe, another team principal might. But Antonelli has looked faster, looked fast in the little bit of practice he did at Monza. And next year they're both on contract years. So Toto seems to be keeping his options open for 2026. And with having seen Lewis go to Ferrari, anything is possible. Max to Red Bull, Max from Red Bull to Mercedes, or George to Red Bull. Anything's possible because 2026 is just marking the beginning of a new era. And these drivers want to be in a seat where with the team that has the best potential to take advantage of the new regulations. And if one team is on the decline, like, cough Red Bull, you might want to be looking across the street at a different seat.
So I'm looking at the current driver standings. You've got Lando short of Max by looks like 48 points ish. No, maybe I'm getting that. 42 points? 52 points. And
52, yep.
And Charles is right there. He's 30 points behind Lando. I don't know how the math works out, but it's crazy to me because everyone's kind of going, "Yep, this thing is going to be this is wrapped up as the constructors title for McLaren because they're so quick right now." Who are like guys like Carlos Sainz can really ruin the possibility of somebody winning a championship there. What's the most likely scenario of how this thing finishes? Let's go top 5 in the driver's standings because right now it's Max, Lando, Charles, Oscar, Carlos. I mean, is it going to end up in that order? Do you think Lando and Max swap? Where does Charles end up? It just kind of with a handful of races still left. How does this thing shake out in your mind?
Oh man, I think Max and Lando go down to the last lap, and it's single digit points difference. I don't know who's going to come out on top, but I do think it's going to come down to the last race of the season, and it could be as whoever wins that race and whoever finishes second, kind of like we had with Max and Lewis. I do think Oscar has a chance of catching Charles, and who knows, maybe even catching Lando. He's 40, almost 40 points behind. So that's a lot to catch. Lando would have to have a few issues. Lando isn't as consistent as Oscar. I think Oscar's the only driver to have finished every single lap of the season. So Oscar's super consistent. Lando a bit more volatile, and if he has a DNF or two, Oscar could pass him. And I like Carlos Sainz could play spoiler. He's going to Williams. He's not going to be in a winning car. He has 6 races left to notch another victory in his belt, and he'll go for it, and he won't care because he's moving teams at the end of the year. So team orders will mean nothing to him. So he could play spoiler as well.
Yeah, I was actually looking at low key that Williams team. If they continue to develop that car, Albon and Sainz is a pretty darn good driver combo for a team that's been so down and out.
Oh yeah. James Vowles has done an amazing job there. They have more, new talent joining the team, and even Albon might be at risk if Colapinto continues to outshine him through the rest of the season. It'll be a tough call if you're James in James's seat.
So this weekend in Austin, I know the Circuit of the Americas has been. I mean, this is at this point, I don't know how many years it's been on the calendar. But what is it like? I mean, obviously Miami has its draw. It's more of the commercial side. Vegas is in its own world. Like you said, you have the Tour of the Americas, and then they end up coming back to Vegas because it does feel like it's a foreign country almost in a way, because it just is. It's a wild setup. It's crazy. In the end, though, is Circuit of the Americas still the best actual racetrack here in the U.S.?
I think so. Yeah, it's purpose built. I think it is it's beautiful to watch the cars ride around there. I don't know if it's produced the best racing. I think that we had a couple of finishes in the last few years that, in the top 10, there was some jockeying in the final laps, but I'm not remembering a drive for a win that really stood out to me. Miami has kind of been a snooze fest. Vegas last year was surprisingly entertaining. So we'll see if that continues in its second race. But if I were to spend my hard-earned money to go see a race in the U.S., I would still be choosing to go to Austin, because I just think you get the whole driver, the whole track experience.
We glossed over, speaking of other regulations here, we talked about it before the show, but I don't think we actually chatted about the elimination of the extra point for the fastest lap. That's obviously on the back of teams gaming the system for one another. If you've got a second team on the grid, which Red Bull does, then they felt like there was some nefarious stuff at work in the last race to be able to have Danny Rick steal that one away from McLaren. So what's going to end up being the fastest lap then? Is it not just, it's not going to be an award at all anymore? They're just not going to do the point system award for it. Maybe there's some sort of a monetary bonus.
Yeah, I think they're just taking the point away from it. I have not read if they're going to remove the award entirely, but they're taking the point away because it's only been around since 2019. So it hasn't been like this staple of the sport for decades. They introduced it to try to, create some excitement and competition. But the fact of the matter is that the fastest lap in the race is not set by the fastest car. It's set by whoever has 25 seconds to the guy behind them with one lap to go, who can come in and pit. And even if you're, Zhou Guanyu, you could set the fastest lap time on the last lap with new tires. And so I think it just defeats the purpose of it. It's not really, useful. And so I'm in favor of it. I think that hopefully it will, remove any chance for kind of what happened with, VCARB stepping in and having an effect on the Constructors and Drivers Championship, which they're not even a part of.
Okay. Before we get to our dream and likely podiums, this feels like one of those races because they've taken off a few weeks. It just feels like one of those races that the possibility of some team showing up and not blowing teams out of the water, but maybe going, oh, dude, they made some changes here. Is that the possibility for this? Or if people just, the car that they have for this year is kind of still the car that they have for this year?
No, I definitely think there are chances for some surprises going into this last stint. A few teams sneaking in. One thing I meant to mention that we haven't is that, Red Bull is out of wind tunnel time.
Oh.
I think I read an interview with Horner that, because they finished first in constructors standings last year, they get the least amount of wind tunnel time.
Sure, yeah.
It was part of an article that was talking about how Red Bull really needs, I think they're building a new wind tunnel, that the wind tunnel they have is actually the most like dated technologically of all the wind tunnels in the sport for all the teams. It's the same one that they bought and retrofitted from like World War II or like a Cold War era airplane development. And so anyways, they need a new wind tunnel, but they've run out of wind tunnel time this year. And so they're at that disadvantage. So some of these other mid-pack teams can continue to do some development, and hopefully that shows up starting this weekend.
All right, let's get to our dream and or likely podiums. I'm going to go, I'll go first just because your answers are typically more thoughtful and measured. So I'm going to go dream podium first. Let's go. I'm still trying to figure out a way. No, Checo's got to figure it out for Mexico. Just I want Checo to throw an absolute wrench in the works for Red Bull to be like, what? I mean, on the one hand, I don't like them acting like, oh, that's why we re-signed him. On the other hand, they've just kind of relegated him so much, it's wild. So I'm going to go start from third. Let's go. Third place is Max Verstappen. Second place is Lando Norris. First place, I'm going to go Charles Leclerc. And I'll say Oscar gets a DNF. Maybe he gets hit. So the actual one I think is going to happen is Lando 1, Oscar 2, and I'll say Charles 3rd on the podium there. That's my reality one there as I'm writing it down here.
Those are good ones. I'll start with my real podium. I'm going to go Lando, Max, Oscar.
Ooh.
I think it's going to be just like a repeat of the Singapore result, and it's going to be just scraping a couple points. Well, I guess in the case of first and second, it's more like 8 points, 7 points that you get that he clears on Max. But dream podium, man, the Charles one is enticing because every this time every year the highlights of Charles when he was driving, I think it was in practice in Austin a few years back at Sunset. It's like I see it on Instagram and TikTok all the time, but it's a solo lap. He's out there. He's the only car on the track. Mm-hmm. The sun is setting in Texas. He crests over the hill. The big Lone Star flag takes up the entire background behind him. And it's usually set to Top Gun music or something else. And it's tear-jerking.
Something American.
It's just so beautiful. Yeah. So I kind of want to say that, but I'm going to go Oscar wins and just has this smug look on his face of, you guys, I told you I was going to support Lando unless I was going to win, and here I am, I'm winning. So
and Lando's that guy too, who's like, I'm so mature now. And then he has these moments that if Oscar steals one away from him, he'll go straight back to being the 18-year-old prickly, kind of tempered kid, so
we'll see. Now we might have a repeat of, I saw a highlight this weekend that reminded me of a USGP race at Austin with Lewis and Nico Rosberg. And I can't remember the circumstances, but Nico was super ticked off at the end. And in the driver's room, Lewis grabs the second place hat and tosses it to Nico, hey, here's your second place hat.
That was in America. That was at Coda. Yeah. I love it.
And Nico chucks it.
He throws it back at him.
It's so great.
Yeah. It's one of the. It's one of those moments that I had seen a bunch in the memes and stuff that people have thrown out there. And then when you get the background to it, you're like, oh boy, F1 is freaking awkward sometimes when it needs to be, which is why we keep coming back for it. So. That's why we want those types of competitions. Oh yeah, we're teammates. We love each other. Sure you do.
Right.
All right.
So that's my dream, I guess. Podium is Oscar, Lando, and then maybe just a Checo sitting there awkwardly, just staring at the other two on the podium.
Or just look, throw Liam Lawson in there, surprising everybody. Come on, we'll figure it out. Yeah. Dan, awesome job. We'll relinquish. This whole deal for everyone to be able to watch the race this weekend, then we'll chat about it next week as we get back into the last 1/5 of the season, I guess. I'm glad we had the 4/5 break of the year, so I'm glad that we're getting back into it again. So for Dan Jimenez, I'm Alex Kirry. Thanks, Dan. We'll chat with you next week, man.
Yeah, right on.
All right. We'll be back again. You can download the podcast wherever podcasts are found. Tell a friend, teach a neighbor that F1 is a sport that they need to follow. It is a production of KSL Sports. It is Mode Push. We'll see you next time, everybody.